number 5 of whatever you call it, the Postmil Project.
I call it a Postmil Project.
Yeah.
You have Culture with Cody and Cory?
Yeah, the Culture with Cody and Cory podcast, or CCCP for the irony. This time, since I titled them after Monty Python references, it's only a model. So that'll make sense.
That's a deep cut. Yeah.
It is. So who are you?
I'm Cory. I get to serve Beechwood Church as one of their elders, and I also host what is now just a podcast called The Cory Truax Show.
Yes. Now that his radio decided that they hate you. And
and they hate talk radio.
Right.
And so all we need in this world is more Hillsong in Bethel. I'm just kidding. If you're affiliated with them, I'm just kidding.
Yes. And so I am Cody. I am the owner of Westminster Effects. Go buy stuff for your guitar at westminstereffects.com. Also a deacon at the location where we're recording this, which is Resurrection Church in Greer, South Carolina.
The thing that brings us together is that we came up in, I think, fairly different theological circles.
Yes.
But have come to Reformed theology.
Yes.
And our soteriology and a lot of our, let's call it, what do you call it, the doctrine of worship? Like we're regulative principle, that kind of thing.
I don't know the exact
term for that.
Yeah.
And then recently coming to a new eschatology, because I grew up in the rapture world. You didn't grow up in the rapture world,
right?
I lived in the amillennialism world, and I'll admit to you, on the Postmil Project, I'm still tempted by it. There are times where some conversations I have where I go, I'm not Postmil, I'm amil.
Yeah.
I just I get
it's easier.
It is. And was RC amillennial? RC Sproul?
He was Postmil, but he didn't make a big stink about it.
Okay, but the idea amillennialism that we're just going to suffer. We're going to suffer and win in cycles, just cycles of wins and losses for everybody until Jesus finally comes back. But now we've both recently, at least fairly recently for me, within less than a year, have decided, no.
Yeah.
The kingdom's going to grow.
Yeah.
Jesus is reigning in a very real way right now.
How long have I been Postmil? About 4 years at this point?
Hashtag that Postmil.
Yeah, because I know I was at least Postmil during 2020.
Right, you said. Yeah.
Yeah.
The worst time ever to become Postmil.
Right. Or the best.
Or as Foskey is calling it now, is it
Fancy Amil?
Fancy, dude. That dude is funny.
Yeah.
If you don't traffic in whatever his first name is, Keith, maybe.
Yes.
Keith Foskey on YouTube, dude is funny.
Yes, his denominational meetings where he's got the very gay United Methodists. You've got the Presbyterian who always has a cigar in hand and has
a sweater
superior
vest.
and a sweater vest with superior theology. You've got the big Eva guy. You've got the typical Pentecostal guy. It's fantastic. And the Lutheran who always has
a beer.
Always has a beer.
And I do love that he lets all of his bigness roll out for the Southern Baptists.
Yep.
Like when he's going to caricature a Southern Baptist, that person's just very fat.
Yeah.
All right. If that's our stereotype.
Yeah.
Cheers to it.
Yes. So basically our project here is, where are we going? What are steps that we're trying to take with this whole Postmil? And we would add a layer to that of theonomic, because you don't have to be theonomic to be Postmil, of the general equity of the law of God should be applied in society today. And I think we can back that up scripturally. So that's our assumption.
Yeah.
We're not going to exegete that every time.
Yeah,
but
real quick. So there are Postmil people who are not theonomy people?
Yes. Who would be more along the lines of natural law, maybe even leaning toward Thomism, stuff like that.
Okay.
Whereas we would lean more toward, in that debate, we would lean more toward the biblicist side of the debate. Though, I mean, obviously we recognize the authority of the creeds and confessions and stuff like that. So, but yeah, you don't have to be theonomic to be postmillennial. And apparently, I think it's very inconsistent, but you don't technically have to be postmillennial to be theonomic. I could
definitely see that being the
case. You could technically be a historic premill and be a theonomist.
Right? To say we want to pursue God's justice, God's thinking and everything.
Right. Yeah. It's just whether you expect that to be accomplished or not.
Yes.
So I guess in terms of jumping into the proper discussion, now that we've exhausted our introduction, you brought up on your podcast, I guess about 6 weeks ago.
It was like almost 2 months ago, yeah.
In the postmillennial world, we often talk big picture.
Mm-hmm.
We want to do these particular things with government. We want to do these particular things with culture. We want to do these particular things in society as a whole. And most of those things won't happen for like 700 years.
Yes.
well, what can we do now? And that honestly, and I think you bring up a good point. We don't bring up the baby steps that we should be taking now.
If I can just tell you my own experience, I got very frustrated.
Yeah.
Because really the person I am most learning from here are the guys at Canon Press, the various people. But Doug Wilson has been big. And I'll just admit my own personal distaste for him. He's not my style. I don't really like the guy. But he's obviously really smart, has been thinking about this, it seems like for decades. I don't know how long he's been Postmil, but it seems like he's decades in.
I seem to recall him saying since the 80s.
My goodness.
So longer than we've been alive.
And so I want to learn from him. But here, I wish I could get into a room with him to say this.
I will be in a room with him next month.
Fight, Laugh,
Feast.
Yes. Where's that?
This one is at the Ark Encounter, actually.
Up in Kentucky.
Yep.
What I want to say is, I think the thing that you've done there in Moscow, Idaho, has affected how you communicate.
Sure.
Because it's super cloistered, and maybe it's a lot, but I just wonder, how many unbelievers have you been around lately? Because the way that you speak comes as one with a ton of assumptions. The people I'm talking to are way down the road of spiritual maturity. Almost it feels like, the people that you're talking to, do you understand they have jobs in the secular world and they're going to go to work on Monday? Because some of the stuff you say sounds insane.
One of the interesting things about Moscow, Idaho, is that the city itself is actually very blue.
Yes,
in
because
the middle
of
of a red state.
the university's there.
Right.
And so I thought about that. What an interesting place to be, saying fairly radical things in the moment around a bunch of secular high-end academics.
Right.
But you also know, we're even where we live, we can cloister ourselves very easily.
That's true.
Into our subgroups. And so I got frustrated with some of the things he would say about how things should be. And just kind of assert them, not make great arguments, and then and recognize, hold on a second, I got people in my church who are going to go to work with normal people. And that thing you just said will put them so far outside of respectability and normalcy, I don't even know how I can make that conversation effective.
Right. And I think it kind of depends on which Postmil guy you're talking about. Like Joe Boot has a certain audience, Wilson has a certain audience, Durbin and White have certain audiences. And so I think particularly because Wilson produces so much content.
It's endless.
I'm not quite convinced that he's a real human. He might actually be a robot with how much he churns out.
Yeah, he's prolific.
Right. And so I think we have to allow certain guys to assume their arguments sometimes, not all the time. I know you called him out on one in particular. I don't recall the argument that he made, but you said you didn't actually make this argument. And sometimes we do need to assume the argument to make a different point.
Because we think we know our audience.
Right.
You know who I have found, I don't even know if he's Postmil, but the guy who has been most effective to me, theonomy-wise, has been Vody Baucham.
Yeah.
He seems to assume nothing. He teaches me things every time, and then helps me talk about it.
Right.
Because just if I'm sending my church, sending believers out of the world, and I just did a weekend of just telling you, all you have your kids in public schools or putting them in a pagan system, we got to shut down the public schools. All right, man, you skipped some steps. I got to have a conversation with real people.
Right.
And so I got frustrated with it, which led me to, what do you actually want me to do besides just say these things?
Right.
Because there's an important point. I mean, I think my elder brother made a great point. Well, step one is always just say the right thing. The step one is always say what is true.
Yeah.
And now how we go about it will be second.
This is baseline, live not by lies.
Yes. Great podcast, by the way, from John Mark Comer called that, but that's based on a whole other discipline, live not by lies. Yep. And so that's where I got frustrated going, I don't even know where to start. You convinced me, and now I don't even know what you want me to do. Which I think you heard and then thought about some things.
Yes. And so I think one of the things that we need to do, I don't like calling myself the right because I'm not right-wing, I'm conservative. Yeah. There is a difference.
There is, yeah.
For those not in the know, the whole left-wing, right-wing thing started in the Fringe Revolution, where those on the left wing of their legislative body, parliament, I don't remember what they called them, but those were the guys who were ready to burn the whole thing down right now and start over.
Yeah.
The guys on the right wing wanted to burn it all down more slowly.
Yes.
So that is what you're talking about, and I think that's what we're actually seeing playing out right now, is the right right-wing populism is, yeah, let's burn it down a little more slowly.
Yes.
Let's go off the cliff at 50 miles an hour instead of 100
miles an hour. Yeah.
So in terms of conservatives, we have not done a good job at thinking locally, politically.
Yeah.
The left has done an excellent job
You're
at
right.
that, which is why you have George Soros-funded DAs.
Yeah.
The way to get around George Soros-funded DAs is to have conservative DAs.
Yeah.
How about that? You know, things like district attorneys, sheriffs, those really matter, such as with the New Mexico governor and her tyrannical executive order banning just willy-nilly banning the public possession and carrying of a firearm within, is it Albuquerque?
It'll be 2 counties ultimately.
Okay. But the sheriff said, no, we're not enforcing that.
Amen.
So sheriffs and school boards, even though I would advocate for the elimination of public schools in the long run, which will probably be in 700 years.
Yeah.
But school boards and fire districts and all of those kinds of things, well, why don't we start there?
We should.
Like, those are pretty easily winnable, if we're being honest.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think of my city easily is about to have a mayoral race in 7 weeks, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
There are, if I recall, it's just under 100,000 eligible voters in the city.
Mm-hmm.
The winner of that race will have about 3,500 votes.
Yep.
It's that small.
That is not difficult to attain.
No, your voter turnout rates for local races, because we so federalized everything. We decided the president was a dictator, and that's where everyone shows up.
Yep.
Your local races have turnout rates of 8 and 9%.
If that.
I mean, I'm not going to do it, but like there was even a thought for me back in the summer. It probably wouldn't be hard for me to be mayor of Easley.
Mm-hmm.
I only need that few people.
Yep.
I mean, I'm talking a $20,000 loan of materials and some online marketing. $20,000 could probably make me mayor of Easley. It is that simple for a lot of these places.
Yep, and even think even smaller than that, like a city council or a county council seat.
Even smaller. Yeah.
Even smaller to have a legitimate voice in local government.
My Easley ward that I just moved out of, I moved houses. The last time she had an opponent, she won her race with, I think it was 891 votes. So
wow.
Fewer than 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And I think it ended up being fewer than, it might have been 1,500 people that voted total.
Right.
Super small groups here.
Yeah, and even the guy that I just got a phone call from before we started recording, my lawyer, he had a story for me, but he was previously the Union County probate judge here in South Carolina. So that's an elected office for them, and he ran his campaign. I don't remember how many votes he had to get, but it wasn't many.
No.
One, it's Union County. It's a very rural county here. And two, it's a local election that not many people care about.
No.
Yeah.
A lot of those even happen, for example, in Easley, Union. They happen in off years. So not during a presidential and not during a midterm.
Right.
So they're on an odd year, a 21, a 23, a 25.
Which makes it even less turnout, yeah.
Very few people turning out. I actually realized, I used to say often, since I've been, even before I was 18, because the way it worked in South Carolina, you can vote in a primary when you're 17 as long as you would be 18 by election day, general election.
Okay.
So the first vote I ever cast was for Jim DeMint over David Beasley.
Oh, wow, yeah.
For the Senate race going into 2004. And I wasn't quite 18. And I said, I haven't missed voting in an election since then. Then I started looking back at local elections. I missed some elections.
Yeah.
I missed some judge elections. I missed some city council things. I missed some stuff because I wasn't paying attention.
Right. So in terms of, all right, so we've got local things, and then in terms of maybe state and then federal, one thing that we want to do too often is we only shoot for the moon ever.
Yes.
Right? And, at least in terms of political promises. I even think back to, now of course this was very popular at the time among conservatives, but when Ronald Reagan ran, part of his platform was eliminating the Department of Education.
I recall.
Which that's not going to happen right now.
Nope.
At least in the short term. Maybe we can start cutting back some of its funding, stuff like that. But one thing that Wilson has suggested is you find the Department of...
He named it. I can't remember which one.
It was something silly.
Yes.
And you make an example out of that tiny little department that no one cares about. It only affects a few jobs, but you can say, we have a win here. And you use that momentum to gradually do other things. It's kind of the incremental approach.
Yeah.
As which, is kind of a raging debate in certain circles of the pro-life movement of, are we abolitionists? Are we incrementalists? Obviously, the incrementalists want abolition. How soon do you do it? How soon is it politically feasible? And tactically feasible even, because if we pass this, are we going to lose the election in a landslide next time and then immediately have worse legislation than we had before?
I appreciate you just saying it out loud, because there seems to be some people who have no interest in thinking that way.
Right.
Their interest is, no, I want what I want. All right, well, if we give you what you want right now, you won't get what you want. You won't keep it for 100 years.
Right.
We'll give it to you for 2, and you will lose it for 100. I don't care. Do what I want. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I need you to grow up.
I particularly think of Matt Gaetz and the current Speaker of the House stuff going on with the budget and all that, where basically Matt Gaetz and that caucus, their entire tactic is just run as fast as you can into a wall repeatedly.
Yes. That's their whole strategy.
It's mind-boggling, because you're not going to get anything done this way.
I'll give you an incremental example at the federal level. If we really wanted to try to start making some kind of difference.
Yeah.
Instead of, I want giant cuts right now to all these things, or we'll shut everything down. Demand of your opponents, 1%. I just want 1%.
Mm-hmm.
If you're telling me you can't find 1% to cut in the entire federal budget, you are obviously the unreasonable one. You are the one that's outside the mainstream. And if I get that 1%, you know what I'll have is a bunch of other years where I can ask for just 1%.
Yep.
Instead,
in 100 years, you get 100%.
If
That's how math works, right?
If you cut 1% of the budget for the next 20 years, you balance it. Rand Paul puts this number out every year. What would require to balance the budget in 20 years? And it really is a 1% cut every year.
Yeah. We don't think in terms of 20 years, though.
No.
You know who does think in terms of 20 years? The Chinese Communist Party.
They have a 100-year plan.
Yeah, they literally have a 100-year plan where we can't think 4 months down the road.
Even for the feds, who have a real role. I did that on my show recently. The feds have a role. Mm-hmm. They're in the Constitution. You may hate it, but Constitution of the United States says the federal government has a role.
Yes.
You may want to start rolling that back, but they do. One of the rules is that they can borrow money. Most of our states run balanced budgets because the money they would otherwise borrow just come from the feds, and the feds gave it to them. South Carolina runs a surplus in part because of a lot of our welfare system. It just comes from the feds.
Right.
We're a taker state. But those would be one. Here's just one example. We apparently have 2 organizations that, this is absurd. One of our Department of Natural Resources offices oversees trout that swim upstream and managing their population. A different office oversees trout that are downstream. It's trout.
Is this from Rand Paul's annual Festivus airing of grievances?
Yes, but it's in there every year. That still exists. There are 2 different departments. They do other things, by the way. They're not just the trout department. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the things they do. I wonder if you could just, I don't know, combine those suckers. Right. And let's save $1 million that year. But what we do say there then to the states, Montana, Dakotas, who have a lot of that, hey guys, we're not going to do it anymore. You have to.
Right.
The feds aren't going to do it. We're going to return that back to you guys. You guys figure it out.
And maybe figure out a way to privatize it and make it better.
Even better than having the government do
it. Because, again, it's good enough for government work. Exists for a reason.
This is one of our biggest challenges at the macro. I love where you started.
Right.
The micro. One of our biggest challenges at the macro is the federal government has become so pervasive for 100 years. The American imagination is so small.
Yes.
Anytime we come to any problem, no one has even thought, I wonder what families could do. I wonder what my mayor could do.
Yep.
I wonder what my community could do. The immediate thought is, what could the President of the United States do?
Yep.
Well, I guess Congress too. Maybe we should ask the Congress what they could do. Wait, do you have a problem in Lincoln, Nebraska? And your first question was, what can someone in D.C. do?
I even have an actionable step for those who are local is here in Greer, they installed this just abomination of a trash can. It's supposed to look like a fox.
Huh.
And it is putrid.
Huh. I got to see this thing.
It is objectively ugly in the park. You know what you can do is you can harass your city officials until they remove the thing.
You can. They're public servants.
Just keep complaining and threaten to primary or whatever it is with city council. I'm not in the Greer city limits, so I don't vote there, so I don't know exactly the entire process. But just badger them until they get rid of the thing. You have a win.
You do.
That's local governance. And on top of that, it helps re-beautify that space that doesn't have the ugly trash can anymore.
What it also does is if you build the culture of localism, even out of your church, maybe even as in the preaching and the discipleship, saying some of you are called to be doctors, some of you are called to be to work in the school system. I still think that's true, even though I'm hearing from all my Postmil people we're supposed to shut down all the schools. All right, well, in the meantime, wouldn't it be cool to have some Christian teachers in there?
Yeah.
Until we get past that. But some of you are called to be local officials. Yep. And if you do that, then if you finally 100 years from now get to some of the things you want in weakening the federal system, you're ready.
Yep.
What would happen right now if the federal system collapsed? Are our local governments strong enough to do the things we need them to do?
Not at all.
Not really, because we've all been obsessed with D.C.
Right.
So we got to build, like you had that 100-year plan for Greer.
Yep.
Just having that kind of vision for your localism.
Now, here's a macro idea that I think we should start making noise for is, and I don't have everything completely fleshed out, but a federal constitutional amendment restricting the amount of days that Congress can be in session.
Love that.
Where maybe you say, all right, 90 days. You have 90 days a year that you can be in session. Now, you can make provisions for emergency things,
sure.
War, terrorist attacks, that kind of thing.
Your committees can meet outside those 90 days?
Right.
But actual session?
Yes, actual session, 90, maybe be generous, say 100 days out of the year. But one of our issues that we have, and everybody knows this and everybody talks about this, is how out of touch so many of our representatives are.
Yeah.
Because they don't live in their home states anymore.
Right.
They actually live full-time in Washington, D.C., especially senators who are there on 6-year terms.
Yes.
So if you want Lindsey Graham to be more in touch with the things going on in South Carolina, make him live in South Carolina.
Yes.
As opposed to in D.C., well, one of the great ways to do that is we're only going to be in session this long or for this many days in a year. You can parse those out through the year. You can have it all at once. But what we are doing is saying, no, you are a representative of that state. Go hang out there.
You know those people, live that life.
Yes.
Yeah. The Texas legislature meets every other year for 5 months. So, there's an entire calendar year goes by. No one goes to Austin.
Right.
The entire government stays at home.
Yeah.
The next year, they show up in January, and they meet till sometime in May. The South Carolina legislature meets from the second week of January. Technically, it's supposed to be the first week of June. There's usually a special session in July where you look at the governor's vetoes and all that.
Okay.
We don't need that much government.
Right.
You don't need to be. You guys could do what you're going to do in 90 to 100 days. And by the way, that does only mean sessions, because like in South Carolina, our legislature meets those months, January through the beginning of June, technically Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of the week, but Monday, wall-to-wall committees. They're not in session, but the committees do their work on Monday before Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday come. So yeah, just having them meet less so they can be with normal humans.
Yes. And hey, how about you go get a job? And maybe that's something that we do too, is massively cut their pay to reflect the fact that they're only going to be in session that amount of time.
Yes.
So that they're not reliant on that particular salary to make their living, which then conceivably, and I'm literally just thinking out loud right now, that could cut down on the Nancy Pelosi's and Joe Biden's of the world who have enriched themselves off of their positions.
Yeah. It's also term limits would be huge, but that's again a long way.
Yes.
That requires a constitutional amendment.
But we can start making noise about restricting the amount of days they're in session.
Yeah.
We can start making noise now.
At least those are some things that help. I mean, the federal government, I've started to see, is kind of just a gigantic monster.
Yeah.
Gigantic monsters don't fall in a day.
Right.
They usually don't fall in a lifetime. And I'm not even saying I want it to fall. I just want it to.
And you're not David, so.
Yeah, I love a Matt Chandler reference. I'm not even saying I want the federal government to fall. Just want it to do what it was supposed to do.
Yes.
And the states to do what they were supposed to do.
We're conservatives. We don't want to just tear down the institutions.
No.
We're not populists.
That's a long road. And so as post-mill people, I just want to talk about it with that kind of humility.
Yes.
Take whatever small steps you can, and some of the grandiose, big pronouncements about what should be. I guess we're going to need to make them, make your big, grand pronouncements.
Yep.
But let's temper those big, grand pronouncements about what should and shouldn't be with some practical steps on how you might just start.
Yeah. This grand pronouncement will happen in 300 years.
Yeah.
You will not see it in your lifetime.
What you and I begin will be finished by generations that I probably don't know that have been born yet.
Right.
And even if we take step one, it might not be step 2 that gets accomplished until my two, not my biological boys, but 2 boys that I had a role in raising, might be their grandkids.
Right.
And I need Postmil people to be okay with that. I mean, the Lord's got his timing. He's going to do what he's going to do. Don't try to rush it. Just be faithful. Which I think leads me to one of my topics I had for you.
Yes.
Unless you have anything else you want to say on that.
No, that's a great transition. Go ahead.
I got comfortable over the last, let's go from 2015 until the last year. So from 2015 to 2022, very much embraced the concept of exile.
Mm-hmm.
I taught on the show. I did on Dr. Beam's show on WHRT, that Jeremiah 29 passage. We are God's people. That was the Jews, but I thought, I'm God's people taken away into exile. Mm-hmm. Christians in exile in America or Brazil or Germany or Australia, wherever they are. What do you want me to do? And Jeremiah just says, give your sons and daughters in marriage, build houses, plant gardens, do not decrease there, work for the welfare of your city, pray for your city. That's what you should do. And I embraced exile. And then Peter even tells me in 1 Peter, that's what I am. I'm an exile in a land waiting for a city not built with hands. And so I have my exile motif. I think I understand what it means to be a Christian in the world. Then I start learning about postmillennialism. And I'm not saying the two things are irreconcilable. I'm saying I'm having trouble reconciling them. So I can be corrected. I can be taught. I'm just saying I'm having trouble. Because an exile feeling is things are going to be fine sometimes. Sometimes things are not going to be fine. But finally, I'll be taken out of exile. I'll get to go home.
Right.
Postmil doesn't feel that way. Postmil feels like, I don't know if I'm in exile or not. I might already be home. We just need to go conquer. We need to go triumph over this.
Right.
And so I don't know how, you can reconcile those things for me, but am I in exile or am I a conqueror?
Yes.
That's right. And your answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of conqueror, I mean, the only real that I'm aware of or that I remember right now, the only time that term is applied to the Christian at the moment in the New Testament is Romans 8. If I recall correctly. Yeah. More than conquerors. But in terms of how I view things, it's, Jesus already conquered.
Okay.
So to go back to Daniel 2, with that vision of the statue with the head of gold, goes on down to the feet of mixed iron and clay, right? And a stone not cut by human hands smashes that statue and then grows until it fills the world.
The tree grows from out of that, yeah.
Right. And so you do have Jesus has conquered. And then I think with the exile language, I think we have to be careful to keep certain things in their context, right? So 1 Peter 1:1, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who are elect exiles of the dispersion, and it lists a bunch of places in the Middle Eastern world. So he's writing to particular people. Now, of course, that has application to us in some sense, right? But we have to remember, Peter wrote that to people even before the Council of Nicaea, right? So, and even before the downfall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And so Christianity, 1, hadn't exploded yet. 2, it hadn't even been decriminalized yet by Constantine, right? And so I think we do have an application now where we've had a repaganized culture for the last several decades, and now they're just running with it. And as you addressed on your own podcast, even on the right side, we've repaganized with the shenanigans by Kristi Noem, Lauren Boebert, etc.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we can feel that exile-ness, and Christians in North Korea are going to feel that more. Christians in Mongolia where they're more pagan and socialist, or India or whatever. But at the same time, like if a Christian in, let's say, 17th century England is living faithfully, I think he's going to feel less exiled because the culture is so Christian. Now, there's going to be certain portions of his life where he's like, yeah, this isn't quite right because it's not quite right yet.
Yeah. Okay, so that I can now that you start talking, I can start to see both. I'm not home yet. I am waiting for a city built with hands, not built with hands.
Mm-hmm.
And not but. And while I await that, I want to see my city Christianized.
Yeah.
And believe it can be.
Right.
So I'll feel like less of an exile.
Yes. And I would even point to, Peter says, we are a chosen nation, right? A royal priesthood. And so when that chosen nation meets on the Lord's Day, you don't feel like an exile in the midst of that chosen nation.
I do not. Yeah.
Right? And so if you have that chosen nation permeating the physical nation, you're going to feel less like an exile there, just out of the circumstance, right? Where if those values and our people, our truest people, right, just exist in large numbers, then you're going to feel that way.
I think because it shaped me, 2015-16 shaped me a great deal in how I think about governments, because the word apocalypse really just means the unveiling. So the apocalypse of Trumpism, the unveiling, the revealing of really what I was a part of and associated with, it had me embracing exile. And I remember one of my phrases at the time is pagans gonna pagan.
Yep.
The pagans are just gonna act like pagans.
And that is true.
And we are saying, yeah, pagans are gonna pagan, but maybe there will be fewer pagans.
Right. Right, and you actually see that through history, even as early as Athanasius in his book On the Incarnation. At the very end, he talks about idolatry is decreasing in the world right now, just straight up, because of the spread of the kingdom. And you honestly see that through the Middle Ages, through colonial times, for the most part, with obvious exceptions. And so, I think it's really the 1800s-ish when you start to see the real decline with restorationism, with all the cults that started in the 1800s and that kind of thing, and what you could call, and there's a great book on this, about the democratization of religion in America, where we've basically boiled it down. It's honestly the Enlightenment applied to the individualism of the Enlightenment applied to theology.
So as soon as you started talking, I had in my head just ringing, Enlightenment, individualism, Enlightenment, individualism, Enlightenment, individualism. That's what comes past the 1800s, because we're going to say the Enlightenment, let's say, launches in the 1750s. Mm-hmm. That intellect and things couldn't spread as fast, right? There was all we had was a printing press. 50 years later, it had permeated culture, where all of life is individualized.
Yes.
I will choose what the religion is. I will choose what to believe.
Sola Scriptura has turned into what we often call Solo Scriptura, of me and my Bible, and you can't tell me what to do.
Yeah, and though it's just so dangerous, but that's I love the Enlightenment. I love that we're children of it. It had its deleterious side effects, and now we have reached the terminus of Enlightenment.
Yes,
where my individualism is such that no one can tell me anything, including my genetics. My genetics can't tell me what to be. I will be my own God.
Yes.
But that was I hate to say it, it was the natural terminus of individualism.
Yes.
Especially if it's not going to be tempered with biblical thinking.
Individual freedom, because I think freedom and liberty are distinct.
Yeah.
If individual freedom is the only thing that matters, then what you get is transgenderism.
Yes.
Whereas if we're talking about ordered liberty within a set of confines, so whether you want to talk about liberty as defined by God's law, natural law, whatever, like look at the regulative principle of worship. And that is the most freeing way to approach the worship of the triune God imaginable, because you don't have to invent new ways to worship God.
Yep.
If you have ordered liberty, you don't have to invent new ways to be free. You're free within those confines. Now go do free things.
Yeah, I find that in all the leadership positions I've taken, people who are not leaders, which is the majority of people aren't leaders, are miserable without boundaries.
Yes.
They will even act out. Children will often do this to get you to give them some. They want to know, what am I supposed to be doing? Someone tell me what to do.
What are the parameters of XYZ, this project, this life?
Yes.
or
That's
whatever.
Ordered liberty. Yeah. Oh yeah, let me walk in the freedom that I'm going to give you the parameters, and if you'll walk in these parameters, you'll be so free, or you'll have liberty. Okay. Then if I've reconciled exile with, I think either were triumph or conquerors, but let's just say exile with being postmillennial. Mm-hmm. I'm often looking for biblical analogies. Like, what can I tell people to look to? Because for 7 years, I taught, well, think about Daniel and think about that passage in Jeremiah. That's you. Mm-hmm. You're in exile. Okay? Well, if that's not quite right, is our analogy Moses and Joshua wandering in the wilderness with the language of conquer the land. And then conquer the land is, what is the land? The things that we've previously done in other episodes. Conquer the arts, conquer education, conquer government, conquer media. Go conquer.
I think the analogy mostly holds up. We've had generations of unfaithful believers, right? And what did the unfaithfulness result in was...
They did not inherit the land.
You're not going to inherit the land. At the same time, I think the difference is, and I think you would agree with me, it's not so much that Israel conquered the promised land. It's more so that God gave it to them.
Amen. Yeah.
And it can be both and, right? Mm-hmm. But as Jesus said, I think it's in Mark, maybe it's in Luke, he said, "Fear not, little flock, it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom."
Yeah.
So we don't go and take it. That's actually pagan thought. So make America great again is actually pagan.
Agreed.
It's more so, it's not even make America godly again. It's God, can you sanctify us? Right? So ultimately, this is overly simplistic, but postmillennialism is simply Calvinism applied to society, where God is sovereign.
Say it one more time.
Yeah. So
postmillennialism is Calvinism applied to society.
Right. It's applied to groups.
Okay.
As opposed to just individuals. Yes, God saves people individually one by one.
I see.
But God, in his grace, saves people unilaterally, and he sanctifies them unilaterally, and he glorifies them unilaterally. So it's entirely possible for God to do that individually to a lot of people, whether it's at one time or through generations or what have you, in one place.
In that case, is the Christian church sometimes used the way Israel was used? I gave the analogy here, not the analogy, I guess the example. I'm almost positive that somewhere near the beginning of God calling Abraham, he says, I'm going to give you this land, and you will be taken from it. You're going to be removed from this land.
Yeah.
And then when the fullness of sin, basically the fullness of depravity has happened in this land,
right,
I'm going to bring you back, and you're going to judge the evil in this land that belongs to you. Are we saying that paganism, Satanism can become so prominent in a land that God will just use the church to punish paganism in that land? And it's by taking over.
Right.
I don't know if I believe that or not. I'm just tossing it out there.
I think maybe the way I would think about it is we've paganized so much that you're starting to see the rubber bands snap back a little bit. There are fewer people this year than last year who are accepting of same-sex relationships, for instance.
I saw that, yeah.
So in general, you kind of see a more conservative influence happening. Whether that's Christian or not, we'll see. But once you've exhausted things like militant atheism, which has been exhausted, you don't have any legitimately militant atheists anymore. You don't have that much as you did 10 years ago. Their influence is gone. well, then what's next? You basically have the New Age movement. You have kind of a quasi-paganism. You effectively have self-worship.
Yes.
That can only take you so far until it leads straight into the pits of despair, because you realize this is, as Paul called it in Philippians 3, skubala.
Yeah.
It's a steaming pile.
Yeah.
Right. This really isn't worth anything. Where do I go now? Oh, it just so happens that the triune God of the universe has provided those answers of what your purpose in life is. Here you go.
Yeah. That actually leads, it's a great response that gets me to...
I would argue this might light a fire under some people. Some people might throw up in the floor over this. I think theoretically it is easier to convert someone who is not particularly politically engaged or liberal to Christianity than it is to convert someone who is on the right wing at the moment. It's
easier to convert someone who is way outside the faith and who seems antagonistic to it.
Yeah.
I would expect that's true.
Yeah. Than someone who's tangentially at least sympathetic to some things that we believe.
Quite familiar. I think, I've come to a spot that evangelism would be easier if people weren't quite familiar with what they think they know.
Yeah.
They think they know the gospel. They think they know the message. I would rather try to evangelize somebody who is coming in with just a general idea. Yeah, I guess you people think there's a guy who died and rose again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, let me expound on that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. And because there's also more despair. You have more people want to be rescued from their despair.
Mm-hmm.
There's
as hyper-individualism has increased, the amount of anxiety and drug usage in our society has ramped up.
I'm not offended if you didn't read it, but I put a blog on CoryTrueX.com about a month ago.
Okay.
A little bit more. And I think it was called Who do we blame for our I forgot the title, and I don't put my blogs out on the podcast feed like you do.
Right.
But so sort of just went through the history. We demanded of Christianity an answer because it was in charge and it did some things wrong in the West. We demanded judgment. The culture demanded, because Christianity was in charge of some things and did some things wrong. All right, well, Christianity has not been the hegemonic power for 40 years. Mm-hmm. And I would say definitely since Obergefell was the new covenant. It was the new covenant of the secular age, where one covenant ended, and so now we're almost 10 years into complete hegemony from secularism, and I would argue our entire lives have primarily been under secularism. Mm-hmm. All right, well, highest divorce rates, highest single parenthood, highest suicide rates. We are awash in SSRIs. Our addiction rates are higher than ever. Your education system can't teach teach kids how to read and to do normal math. You actually have people are underlooking this. A fairly large sexual assault and abuse problem in your public schools, the same way that the Catholic Church had when you were blaming it for everything. Every measure, your art is ugly. Your stories are boring. This is the culture in which you live.
Not just your art that's ugly. Your people are ugly too.
The people are literally because our obesity rates are higher than ever. Not that obesity necessarily means ugly. I'm just saying we're not taking care of ourselves. Yep. Secularism did this. Now, where do I go to make judgment? Because you guys judged us when we did a bad job of it. I want to judge our secular priests. You have ruined everything. And now that you have ruined everything, you do hope. Gosh, I pray. There are people that look for something else.
Mm-hmm. God, that's a good point.
I don't know who to go judge. I mean, I can't grab Richard Dawkins and put him on trial, but right. I do want to say to secularism, you ruined everything.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it. Which I guess leads me to, that was it. I had one final thing I've been mulling over. I finished reading The Fourth Turning.
Yep.
The Fourth Turning is Here, which was the sequel to The Fourth Turning.
Yep.
From that, I gathered a lot, but one thing I gathered is there's never a way back. There's only a way through. So even the concept, make America great again, or you said make America godly again.
Yep.
The idea of making anything happen again, I have abandoned.
Yes.
We never go back. Mm-hmm. We only go through. And so now that we're in... the hegemony is paganism, secularism. The way through calamity and destruction, and then after calamity and destruction, and I'll define that, maybe a disastrous war for an international war in the Western world. Absolute financial collapse, because we're built on house of cards anyway, with fake interest rates and fake money backed by nothing. Maybe real calamity financially. Maybe something in environmental or natural disaster because the Lord controls the earth, the heavens, and the seas. And then the world looks around after it's been rocked to its core and say, does anyone have anything to build on? And the church is there. Is the way through absolute destruction. I'll tell you this, little spoiler alert, I don't want that. I love my boys. They are 20 and 19. I don't want them to live through destruction. I look around in my church and I see a bunch of babies, absolute babies, children under five and under. I don't want their 20s to be in calamity. I don't want them to live through that. Now, I don't have any control over it. Is that the way through? It has to be destruction and rebuilding. Or is there a different way through that is some kind of renewal, spiritual renewal?
That's a great question. I think it's kind of maybe the way I would approach things in general with this, like regardless of whether it's calamitous or whether it's just societally calamitous, right? Everybody kind of realizes at one time we've gotten nowhere. Maybe a blending of what's often called the Benedict option and the Boniface option. The Benedict option being our churches are going to meet. You can come hang out if you want. Come see what's going on. The Boniface option being, so as the tale of St. Boniface, I believe it was in the 800s goes, he was a missionary to the Germanic tribes, and he went to Thor's tree. The myth of Thor's tree was if you touch Thor's tree, Thor will kill you. And he said, all right, tomorrow morning, I'm going to chop down this tree and prove to you that my God is bigger than Thor. The next morning, he cut down the tree. He didn't die, and the entire village converted. Which this is how we have Christmas trees.
Cool.
So yeah. So it's I think we need to blend those of, yes, we're gonna do our thing over here, but also when we see the opportunity, say, I'm gonna cut down your holy tree and prove to you that the triune God is superior to your little g God, and you'll have to deal with that. Right? And that's not very hard right now. It's really easy to do.
Thor's trees are very weak in this culture. Their roots are not deep.
If anything, they're saplings.
It's interesting.
Which, all you need is a bush hog at that point. Some of these, you don't even need that. You just need a little push mower.
So for Boniface, in whatever culture that was, those Germanic tribes, it really was just a symbol of their local religion.
Practically, yeah.
The religion of our age, LGBTism, if the answer is yes, fine, but are we saying that tomorrow I'm ripping down the pride flags?
I don't know about that. So
I don't want us to do that.
Right. When Boniface issued his challenge, they accepted the challenge for one.
Okay.
So in effect, they expected Thor to kill him.
Okay.
So as soon as he takes a swing with the axe, Thor kills him.
Got it.
Destruction of property is different.
Good. Okay, so we're there.
I think the Boniface option could be as simple as, hey, look at this family. That's beautiful. Now look at Bruce Jenner.
Yes.
Seriously? And that's all you have to say.
Okay.
Look at the green-haired, bangs cut, a centimeter and a half across the top of the forehead. You're telling me that you're happy, and I'm gonna call BS on that.
Yeah. That I'm all the way in.
Yeah.
Because I just went on my rant of how ugly the world is.
Yeah.
To say the broken families and the brains awash in SSRIs and the high addiction rates and suicide rates, you all did it. It's disgusting and it's ugly. And now I have something to offer you.
Yep.
Where men love sacrificially and they don't choose themselves.
Yep.
Where women honor their husbands and they raise little families together.
Yes.
And they go to work faithfully. They're not finding their meaning from their work. There's a better way. To quote Mandalorian here, this is the way. To say to the world, you have found destructive paths. I know the way. This is the way. Follow here.
Yep.
That's more of a Boniface thing?
To an extent, yeah.
Okay.
The Boniface option is often associated with being a tad more blunt.
Okay.
Of, I'm going to come in and destroy your idol.
Yeah, and even when you said it, you might know of me. I was not comfortable with that.
Right. You're not a confrontational guy.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
And it's not just that I don't like it. It is also that I find it, until it's necessary, I find it unproductive and ineffective.
And often it is.
And also the people who like conflict are often the worst at it.
That's also true.
I'll say of me. Now I'm married. We don't fight much. Actually, I don't really know if we have in 10 months of marriage. We've had some conflict, but I've never called a fight.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I'll say of me. I hate conflict. I'm really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really good at hearing what's going on because I don't get clouded by emotion.
Yep. Same here.
And saying, all right, I understand what we're actually talking about here, and I know a way forward. I actually know what I did, what I shouldn't have done or shouldn't have said. I got it. We can do this. Mm-hmm. It seems to be the people that want to fight are looking to mow stuff down and burn it to the ground.
Yeah.
I don't want to fight for the burning down part.
Right.
I want conflict to create something new and good.
Yes.
And beautiful. So if that's the Boniface way, I need to read more about that. I'm very familiar with the Benedict option. Yeah. Very familiar. I read the book. And that, I don't know, there's to me, there's some real value in the Benedict option for this reason in particular in our day. I don't know if we're going to get there, but it feels like the financial system is eventually going to start shutting you out as a business owner.
Yeah.
That if you don't affirm certain things, you might not have access to banking.
I'm actually less sold on that right now.
Good.
Because you've seen repeatedly, even over just the last year, more and more companies, including Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies, scale back their DEI stuff.
They have, yeah. I've seen that. I need to see more of that. I want to be encouraged by that. Benedict option just being, we need our own Christian option for everything.
Sure.
That we have our own banking infrastructure. We have our own transportation infrastructure when you're told you can't participate anymore. Okay.
You know what I would say?
Yeah.
So with this Boniface option, it can be very simple. I would also apply the scripture of not many of you should be teachers. Not many of you should be internet apologists.
Amen.
So we need to learn how to do these things in our own ways. There are some people who their Boniface option is literally, hey, I took this great trip to the mountains with my family. Here's pictures of it. That is a way of exercising the Boniface option because that tears down idols, right? This is beautiful. Look at it. It's amazing. Thank God for it. Some of us who have platforms, small or large, are in positions with the ability to wisely and responsibly tear down those idols, whether it's transgenderism or Trumpism and yes, I did lump those together.
Good.
And I don't by that mean supporting Trump. I mean Trumpism. There is a difference.
Yes.
There are some of us who can be more public about that responsibly. Not everybody needs to start a podcast. Not everybody needs to start a blog.
Amen.
Said by two guys who have podcasts and blogs.
but also two guys who have been doing it since we were kids, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a column in a newspaper when you were 18 or 19 years old.
Yeah. Probably shouldn't have, but it gave me practice.
But we made mistakes and learned how to do it better.
I had, when I was 16 for Christmas, part of my present was a Rush 24/7 membership.
I recall this, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like I've been doing the thing for a while. I've been screwing up the thing for a long time too.
Same.
But we have the experience. We didn't just get red pilled all of a sudden.
Oh, gosh.
And now we want to burn the world down.
Like example here, we have too many podcasts and speakers.
Yep.
Like Steven Crowder should never get another second from any of you. And when you have his general attitude and demeanor, you're never going to be effective for anything. You're only destructive. Not to mention what he's done with his wife, and there's all kinds of reasons not to listen to that guy anymore. We don't need a lot of that, but we do need. I love the regular apologetics of just. My wife has said this about our church. She's never been around a room of men that just seem to adore their wives and wives that seem to adore their husbands.
Yep.
That doesn't happen anymore. You want to do something that's incredibly apologetic and grows the kingdom? Go to work and say something nice about your spouse.
Whew.
That's
spicy.
In a room
for so many people, but it's in reality, it's about as spicy as Duke's mayonnaise.
Yes, it should. That's a pretty good one. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But in a world that is so negative about marriage, just love your marriage and pump it up like crazy.
Yeah.
When people it's a world super down about kids. When you have the opportunity, brag on your kids in a non-obnoxious way. Thank the Lord for their development and their health, and that you are glad you get to go on vacation with them. You're not. I hear people sometimes, I mean, those vacations were so much better when we didn't have kids. They don't say that stuff.
Yeah.
We love kids. We love our marriages. Just that kind of stuff is small ball. There's a baseball thing here where you don't need home runs, and it's a different philosophy of offense.
Yep.
But we just small ball our way.
Move the runner over.
Just move the runner.
Yep.
And those are small things.
Yeah, there are absolutely times where a 3-run home run is, you never argue with a 3-run home
No,
run.
right. Sounds great.
You never argue with hitting a grand slam or whatever, or someone like Ronald Acuna Jr. leads off the game with a dinger. Cool. But there's also times where just accept the bleeder between first and second base that gets you on, and then the next guy who also hits a single, and then the next guy actually drives in a run. Like the little things all add up, including the pitcher throwing strikes.
Yeah.
Like not every strike is a strike out.
But you do need the strikes.
You do need the strikes. You need to fill up the zone. Man, we're just running with this baseball.
And it's actually a really good one. So what pitches do you need to be throwing? Become an expert on
what's the situation.
Yes. Yeah. What's it? Oh yeah. Knowing what time, where you live, when and where you live, in the strikes you throw. Or I'm going to be an expert on what the Bible's called me to be as a man or a woman. I need to become an expert on what the Bible's called me to be as a husband, a wife, or a citizen. I'm going to get into those things and I'm going to act them out.
Yep. And on top of that, I'm going to know what kind of player I am.
What my role is.
What my role is. There are some guys who run slowly and they hit the ball 450 feet every now and then. There are some guys who weigh 180 pounds soaking wet, and they slap the ball around and they get on base for the guy who can hit the ball 450 feet.
Get him home, yeah.
Know what your role is. And that's where the podcast that we just recorded, we talked about spiritual giftedness and how that's recognized by the church. So you need people around you who will inform you, hey, I see this in you.
Yes.
And some of us will be informed, hey, maybe you need to take a step back on social media.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to not have a podcast, and you need to listen to them.
And then get better at it. Maybe you'll have that
ministry
later.
Maybe you refine the craft, and then you get better at it, and then they say, oh yeah, let's run with that.
It's good. Yeah, we're probably up against that hour, but
we are.
Sure, we at least reconcile some things in my own head about being an exile and also expecting to win.
Yeah.
So that's good. Thanks, man. That's good stuff.
To finish the baseball analogy, we're not going to lose 100 games every year.
No, sir. Has anyone lost 100 games this year already?
I believe the Oakland A's have.
They
have been putrid. Maybe the Kansas City Royals as well, if I remember correctly. But if they haven't yet, they will.
Bless
their hearts.
Just some social media stuff. You can find me, Cory Truax, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, also CoryTruaxShow@gmail.com, CoryTruaxShow@gmail.com, or go read that blog I wrote at CoryTruax.com.
Yeah. And for me, WestminsterEffects.com. You can subscribe to the Westminster Effects Doxology Podcast wherever you find podcasts, which also includes YouTube now. You can also find my blog that I write occasionally at CodyFields.com, and I also do the audio version on my podcast feed as normal. What else?
Nothing else, I don't think.
I don't know.
We'll do it again next month, maybe.
Yeah. Let's hope.